Welcome to this week's episode of the Good Luck Club podcast. Our mission is to help 1 million people start a business of their own, and we're well on our way. We're here broadcasting today from the Belsize Park Library in North London. We believe libraries are not part of the past, they're part of the future. In our view, libraries are knowledge centres, not places that books sit, but where knowledge sits. So we're proud to be broadcasting knowledge from here today to you. My entrepreneurial guest is Anna Skare Nielsen, Chief Futurist at Universal Futurist. Anna, welcome.
Thank you so much, Simon. I'm so happy to be here.
Likewise, wonderful to have you here. Well, could we start off the podcast by you kindly introducing yourself to the audience?
Yes, I can. And I'm so happy that you're sitting in a library. I didn't know that you were, because I was saved by libraries. I'm a book person, a book girl. Didn't have any friends growing up, always felt like on the fringes, out of the social setting. So I lived most of my life in books, and I love libraries. I don't know if you know, but many people are super scared about librarians.
Oh, really?
Librarian anxiety, yeah. But then again, in any adventure, I don't think you can find any science fiction movie where there is not a library, and where the library has kind of like, guru style, a magical scenery is the library. So I think that as a futurist, that the library is, like you're saying, it's not a thing of the past.
We're looking for sustainable ways to keep, like in England in particular, libraries are in real trouble. They are not funded by the government anymore, and they're not the core necessity that they should be. I mean, I love libraries for many reasons, similar story to you, but I think libraries are the only place left in England where you can go to a library and no one expects money from you as soon as you walk through the door. And it's the only place, I think, that still kind of serves the underserved. And you can get Wi-Fi here, and not everyone can afford Wi-Fi. You can get access to knowledge. Not everyone can afford knowledge. So it's really important to save them. So you're contributing to saving libraries in England today.
I am very happy. I wouldn't have been here where I am today if I didn't had libraries.
Maybe we could start off just by telling the audience a little bit about you.
Yes, I am a futurist. And when you are a futurist, you actually have the world's best job, especially if you're a curious person, because a futurist is it's an eclectic science. And with eclectic, that's just a pretty word for being allowed to steal from everywhere. And that is what we do, is that we're looking into the future. We're working with trends and scenarios and planning for the future and coming up with these ideas about not so much the problems that we have today, but the good life of the future. So we're bringing in many, many perspectives, always on the lookout for what's happening, what's moving, and what directions to go in. And deep down under that is always the question about the good life. What is the good life for people? How will we work in the future? What's the family status? What products are we going to buy? So it's I'm always on the lookout for more futurists.
How do you spot them?
For more entrepreneurs. I'm always looking for more futurists.
How do you spot them?
Well, it's people who love talking about the future. It's people who love talking about possibilities, and they don't need to have an answer. Usually it's also people who enjoy talking about dilemmas. Should we do this or should we do that? Like, should we work from home or shouldn't we work from home? Without coming up with a conclusion, but just because they're thinking this is fun to talk about. It's also the people who sometimes will drag their children into watching movies where if you were an adult, you look a little bit pedophile if you come alone or like a stalker. So you have to have kids to come in and watch a Pixar movie or a science fiction movie. But basically you would just go by yourself if you could.
I've had that problem. I wanted to go watch a Pixar movie and thinking, am I allowed to go on my own? Yeah,
exactly right. Weird, because you really feel like a stalker or somebody.
Yeah, exactly,
so you grab some kids and go in and see the movie.
So should we be working from home or should we go back to the office?
I think we should do both. I think that there is no need for many people to drive and sit and commute through cities and town. I actually think that what's happening right now with people working from home, we should have done that based on sustainability. Many, many people were tired of commuting. And of course, there's some jobs where you actually have to go. Like if you're a dentist or a cardiologist, it's a little hard to take the work home with you. But most people today could do their job, I think, in 3 days' time, and then they could be entrepreneurs. in 2 days of the week, spend two days off. I think that's feasible. But I think that we also need to change our mindset, because in Denmark right now, if you want to work from home, or you might have a 4-day work week, the next thing that comes up is that then we are going to pay you less salary. But I do think in 10 years' time, we are going to say to each other that if you finish early, you should actually have more pay because you're super effective. I don't think that, working long hours and getting paid for long hours might not be a thing that is connected anymore.
Well, folks, Anna and I have met before. We did a live podcast before. I'll put the link here if you want to hear how Anna thinks about the future. But today's podcast, I really want to get into your story.
It's about me.
How did you get into being a futurist? I was just looking at your CV. I mean, it's just, very impressive, first of all. But tell us your journey.
Yes, I now I can tell you like the perfect story, where it looks like I made decisions and I had a plan and a strategy, and I can also just tell you the true story. And I think you prefer the true story. I never knew what I wanted to do. Never. I remember being a little bit envious of people in my class who said that I want to work in a bank when they were like 14 years old. And I was like, it must be so nice to know what you want to do when you grow up. And I had no idea. So instead, I actually turned it around. So I've been using a principle, which is that I might not know what I want, but if I know what I don't want, I have to drop everything and then make a decision about not being there. And then rather just being in an open, undefined field than being stuck in a situation where I know this is not what I'm supposed to do. And that has worked really well, that I venture into something and I give it my best, because that's what I learned from my dad, is that you always have to do your best. And after a certain period of time, could be 2 weeks or 3 months or 6 months, if I can really feel in my core, that I'm not thriving here, then I make the decision and I move out of it. And then I would rather be in an undefined space. So I'm a biologist by education. I'm also a political scientist. And I thought that I was supposed to work in environmental politics. And then I worked at a government institution in Denmark, and it was so boring. It was so boring. I wrote a letter to my boss at this institution about why I thought that the way that he talked about sustainability was wrong. So I wrote him and said, this is not going to work. And then he called me, and I was supposed to come and talk with him. And I explained a lot of stuff about what I saw in the future. And he just, I think he thought I was funny. I thought he thought I was pretty entertaining. And I remember closing the door and thinking, this is not for me. And on my way out, after I quit, I saw a poster, and there were 3 jobs listed as futurist. And I didn't know what a futurist was. But I thought, this sounds a little bit like a Jedi from Star Wars, or a little bit like an astronaut, a futurist. That is what I want to do. And I applied for one of the jobs and I didn't get it. And then I thought, should they actually decide that, should other people who don't know me be in a position where they can make, they can make the decision about my life? So I actually just went to work and pretended that I had a job at the Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies. And then my strategy was, I just have to be really, really good at this. I have to be super helpful. I have to just work overtime. I didn't have any kids at that moment. And I worked there for no money for, I think, maybe 5-6 months. And then the director of the place came and said, we can't find your contract. And I said, well, that's strange. And they said, maybe we should make one. And I said, yeah, let's do that. And then I worked there for 3 years.
That's amazing. So that is absolutely amazing. I love that. So you kind of didn't let no stop you.
No means not at the moment. That's what I hear. When people say no to me, it's because they don't understand it, or it's because not right now. That's what I hear. And I have another principle, which is that if people don't understand what I'm saying, it's always my fault. And I give a lot of keynotes and presentations, right? So if I can see that people are glazing over and I'm losing them, that's always on me, because that's my job, is to get people to see what it is that I'm seeing. So when they told me no, that is what I thought, is that also they're saying not right now, but I want the job right now. And they don't understand what I'm coming with. So I have to show them what I have. And it worked. So I can highly recommend just showing up at a job that you really want and say, thanks for hiring me.
I think we could create quite an exciting movement if that took on, with people just turning up. I'm here.
Yes.
You just join the Zooms. I think that happens already. You just be like, I'm here. What can I do to help? People are like,
I think you could have so much fun, right? But I think that you can just change your mind and have all the fun in the world. It doesn't matter what situation that you're in. If I got laid off, let's say that I still had my normal job at the Copenhagen Institute and I got laid off, what I thought that I wanted to do was being a conference crasher. Because when you go to conferences, right, you have those nice hotels or lovely places where they have conferences, and there are always somebody who doesn't show up. So you wait until the end, and then you go to the desk, and then you could be, you're not Simon Squibb anymore. You are, who could you be? You could be George
Sorrel, easy.
Peterson, George Peterson. So now you're George Peterson, and you just put that little, ledger on, and you go into the conference.
You're talking about wedding crasher in a business context. It's
a conference crasher.
Yeah, I think.
And then you go in and you hear about farming equipment, and there's a really nice lunch, and then people will come up and ask you, so what do you do? And then you just go, well, I do snap. But what do you do? Because people always love to talk about themselves. Yeah, that's what I wanted to do then.
I have to say, I think the way of thinking is brilliant, and actually, it is very much what it's like to be an entrepreneur. I think because an entrepreneur, like when I was 15 years old, no one was going to let me be a CEO of a company. It was never going to happen. But I felt I knew stuff and I felt I could build stuff. So I am a CEO, but no one was going to give. So I just decided I was a CEO of a gardening company at 15 years old, and off I went. And that belief made it happen.
This dude, maybe you heard about him. His name is Churchill.
Winston.
Used to be, yes, Winston.
Yeah,
and,
vaguely.
Winston has written many interesting books, and autobiographies about himself. And I remember when I was quite young, I read in his autobiography, which very charmingly is called My Early Years. I really loved that. Like he was like 40 something. And then you write an autobiography called My Early Years. It's like, okay, then I finished with that. And now I'm moving into something else. And he had that quote, to quote himself, which is that the easiest way to become what it is that you want to be is to pretend that you're already there and just start acting accordingly. And when I was around maybe, I think 27, 8, I had this realization that I was on the hunt all the time. It was like, when are you really, truly happy? It's like I had all these amazing things happening to me, and I was never really content. It's like, on to the next one, on to the next one, on to the next one. And then I sat down and I did some introspection and asked myself, so when am I there? When have I arrived in that position where I would say, now this is it. Now I'm happy. And the first thought I had was that my gravestone, right? That would be like, here, finally, not rest in peace. It would be other people saying, now we have peace. Finally, she stopped talking. And then I did this, soul searching, and I really, truly had to answer that I would be content, not even if I sat behind the Oval Office, in the Oval Office behind the desk. My first thought, if I got elected president in the United States, would be, okay, what now? And then I realized that my favorite position would be CEO of everything. If I could be in charge of everything on the planet, then I would be truly happy. And then I did the Winston Churchill. I kind of like just, promoted myself to being the CEO of the world and started behaving accordingly. So I didn't have any clients. I only had subdivisions. And then I realized that the work is still as hard. Like if you met Jesus, he would also go around telling stories and not using his powers to coerce people, because he tried that before and it didn't work. So the whole behavior that you had to have if you want to be a benevolent leader of the world is, of course, to be a futurist, right? It is to show people visions of what could be, but you're not allowed to manipulate them. They have to use their own free will to see what's better for them. So I can't just, can't force people into the future, but I can show them wonderful visions.
So amazing. How long have you been in charge of the whole world? Because I might have a bone to pick with you.
It's not going that well. It's between 20 from 29 years of age, and now I'm like 49, 48. But I fired myself 5 years ago because it was super stressful.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing. I think some of the listeners listening, the idea of, running the world would scare them, like... But you should try it. Every movie you see with a supervillain, where you're thinking, you did not think that through, honey. Because what you want to do is that you want to wreak havoc on the world with nuclear disaster because once somebody stole your girlfriend and you never really got over it, and then your exit plan is that you want to live on the bottom of the ocean floor with a cat as your only friend. That's like, you can do that now. It's much easier to build a house on the ocean floor and live with a cat than it is to, boom all the... I feel like most of the time the supervillains are just wanting to kill everyone that doesn't agree with them and start again. That seems to be the general plan of on the
It's
evil.
like, and have you thought it through, right? Because then you're just going to end up alone.
A lot of robots. A lot of robot friends, maybe.
Who everybody's agreeing with you.
Yeah. Well, that wouldn't be so bad.
I have to say, my worst idea for the future is everyone is me. That's my worst nightmare. That I wake up in the morning and everyone is me. So every person I meet is myself and looks like me and wants the same things.
You'd have a lot of interesting debates, wouldn't you? I think you'd disagree with yourself just for the sake of it, But going back,
exactly.
Again, going back to your kind of how you got where you are today, being this chief futurist of your present company. Now you've said your age, I can say it. You were born in Denmark in 1971. Were you born into a family that was permanently talking about the future? How did this happen to you?
No. I might be the only normal person in Denmark. My name is Anne, and my last surname is Nielsen. That's the most average name you can have in Denmark. My dad is a high school teacher, he's retired now. My mom was a therapist, and she quit her job to go at home and attend to the children. I have an older brother, a younger brother. We are so normal. There are no traumas, no depressions, no divorces. Oh yes, now we had one. So that's kind of like a little bit more normal. And usually if we have a party and have to give a speech, that would be what I'm criticizing my parents for, is that we are so boring and so normal that everybody else has a fun story to tell. And we are like, no, nothing ever happens. So I've been loved, I have had a really nice childhood. We didn't have a lot of money. My dad and mom always prioritized that we could have vacations together and spend time together. But it was kind of like everything on a shoestring and on a budget. So I think that my motivation for being an entrepreneur in the beginning was not to be rich, but it was to have economic freedom. So just do whatever I want to do. Freedom is very important to me. So I don't want to have a job where I earn a lot of money. I would actually much rather be there where money is not an issue. It's not something that you're thinking about. But I didn't thought about being an entrepreneur before I went, I was 3 years at the Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies. And all I did was talk with clients. It's a membership organization where people come in and then you make these keynotes or conferences or meetings where you're helping them see the future. So you're listening a lot, right? You're always on the podium and you're always talking with people. And I like to help people. So of course I want to kind of like come up with new ideas. Everybody started at that time about talking about innovation. Nobody knew what it was, but that was kind of like the new word of the time. So I went to my boss together with 2 other people and said, should we make a department that worked with innovation? And he said no. And we said, And then I started my own company. And I actually heard that that's one of the most successful recipes is 2 people going into their CEO saying, should we? And he says no. And then they start their new company based on that idea.
I think that's a really good insight for anyone out there that is wondering whether they should start a business. Go pitch it to the CEO you work with right now. If they say no, go do it yourself. Give you good motivation, isn't it? It's also a bit like, proved you were wrong.
And I didn't know anything, right? I didn't know anything about anything. I just really wanted to be a futurist. I really wanted to be the best futurist in the world. And if I could make money out of that would be I'm so happy. And I think that we are a very good example of an organization that's an alternative to all the guys and girls going into I think in Britain it's called Dragon's Den, that program where you go in and pitch your ideas. In Denmark, it's called the Lion's Den. So we have the lions, you have the dragons, but it's basically the same.
I don't know why they always pitch them as so aggressive as well. I mean, they feel like lions will eat you. So it becomes
lions and dragons. You have to be dragon fire and fighting like a lion, and the blood is spurring. And then you're telling entrepreneurs this story that is why it's how it's supposed to be. Like, American version of a business success. You're working 80 hours per week, and the blood is spraying all around, and you're living in your car, and you don't have time for your family.
You'll tread on anyone to get ahead. It doesn't matter. Yes. All these moral code incorrect. Yeah. Totally.
And I have never been like that. I wanted to build a business, and I hear now that they're called zebras. So it's not a lion or a dragon, it's a zebra. I think you can call it whatever you want. But when you do that, am I frozen again?
No, it's okay. I think it's okay. I'll tell you if it's got.
And we're back.
It's called sleepers, is it? Did you say sleepers?
Zebras, the horses with the stripes.
Oh, zebras.
A zebra, yeah. Zebras. So it's not a lion and it's not a dragon, but it's a zebra. Yeah, I think you can call it whatever you want. But for me, having my own business has meant freedom. It has meant that I could develop myself and my company in the direction where I make the decisions, but also be able to go home and spend time with my children. I could have traveled the earth much more than I have done. When I get a calling from Las Vegas to come and talk at a conference, I could have done that much more, because there are not many women in the world who talk about the future, innovation, technology, and leadership. We are not many. There are abundance of men. So I get picked just for being a woman, and I actually don't care. I just say that, okay, if that's my entry, that's okay. But when I'm on stage, I'm going to blow your hair off your heads. And when I'm sitting in an airplane, I'm kind of happy. I think this is nice, but I so much miss my children. I think that as a mom, I have to be together with my children. I also think that working makes me a better mom. So my kids also know that I like them, I love them, but I don't want to be with them all the time. And then they say, but mommy, you have to be with... No, not all the time. Why? Okay, imagine this, my love. You are sitting with your friends. You're playing PlayStation. You have 2 friends over, and you're having a really nice time. And now I come in and I want to join. I want to talk. I'm standing in front of the TV and asking you questions. What do you think about that? And they say, that's pretty goddamn annoying, mommy. Yeah, that's how I feel about you.
Great. Well, that's a great parental tip. I wasn't expecting a parental tip today, but that is a really good one. Yeah.
I think for entrepreneurs, if you are parents, I think that you're a role model. I really want to show my kids that there are different ways of working. And when I tell my kids that I'm going to work, I never give them this sensation that I'm forced to do it. When I go to work, it's because I choose to go to work. This is my own responsibility that I chose to have a lifestyle like this. So if I'm away from you, honey, it's because other people have a need for me to come. Now they're bigger, but when they were smaller, I would actually tell them that. I would say that, more, there are these people and they are really stuck in what they do and they are really afraid of the future. And when I come and I tell them stuff, then they're really happy. And then they go home to their kids and hug them instead of kicking them. So that's why mommy is away for a couple of hours. And then they'll say, that's good, mommy. We'll see you.
That's brilliant way of doing it.
Yeah, and I brought them along. My kids have seen the world. So if I have a client who books me, very often I will bring my family along. So I think it's very important for kids to see the world.
Yeah, I think you're touching on something that it's very important for people to pick up on too, which is the kind of work-life balance and an element of time for yourself, but also including your kids in your work life.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people overlook that. Actually, it's a lot of the time I hear people won't start a business because they think they're going to be away from their family. But you can integrate your work and your life where companies don't really allow you to do that if you don't own the company. Letting you bring your children on a business trip wouldn't be as easy if you work for someone else, right? But if you work for yourself, I actually think you get more time with your children. You just have to really carefully manage things and manage your priorities.
Yes, right? and you have to be good. You have to be a good manager, right? Because when you're an entrepreneur, even if you're just yourself, you also sometimes have to give people a job, and you have to pay them to do the job. And it could be a freelancer who comes in and translates your website. So you have to be able to actually do that. That's a skill set in itself. And then you can actually rehearse that on your children. So my children have done many kind of small jobs for me where I have paid them a little instead of just pocket money, right? Then that was their salary. And I can see children really grow from that. Totally. I tell my children, I need you. I need you to do this. Our family life will be better if you participate with this job that is yours and you take a responsibility. Because it's going to be the same when they grow up, right? That's
such good
everybody
messaging.
Is becoming an entrepreneur.
I think it's such, I love it. I love what you're saying, because I think for so many people, they do try to separate their life and don't include their children. And they tell their children, I've seen it, a child will come over to them on a Zoom and they'll say, go away, I'm busy. And I like to bring my son into the conversation and let him be a part of it. And I feel like, I have the same philosophy as you, frankly. I love the idea. My son contributes to some of my content, and I think it makes the content better. I'm not just saying it to make him feel like he's included. I genuinely think his contribution makes things better. And I think if you can integrate like that, listeners out there that are trying to separate things, you might be adding a layer of stress to your life because you're trying to do that. So I really love this point. At what stage in your career did you have kids? Did you naturally know this, or did this just come over time?
I was 30 when I had my first child, and then it was really hard making him. You're really thinking about, why did I eat all that contraception for those many years if it's so hard to make a baby? And then we had the first one, and then after that it was kind of like, now it's a roller coaster. So I had twins very early after that, and then I had the final one, number 4, because my husband said I can make a girl. So now we have 4 boys.
Well done. Oh, whoops. That's amazing. I'm one of 4 boys, by the way. And you're right. I mean, my wife and I also had some trouble having our first child. It's actually surprising, isn't it? How you think it's all easy and so natural. Therefore, you spend your first half of your life, I think, trying to avoid it.
Yes.
And then you realize how hard it actually is. Now it's like
this big battle. Yeah. And then I had, again, this epiphany. And I think that's also really nice if you're looking at your life with, that you're just stumbling into the woods and you're just doing the best that you can. And then you look back and then you reflect upon, so how did it go? Did I step on something I shouldn't have stepped on? Did I leave anybody crying that I had to say sorry for? I'm really good at doing inner inventory. Every day I'm kind of like scanning myself to see, is there an ugly spider lying? Is there somebody where I can feel that there's a weird sensation that I had to cope with? I'm really good at saying sorry as well if I think that I did something to make people sad. And even I can remember back, I had a friend, a really good old friend that I met when I was, again, 28 years old. And she just had a leave from work because she had stress. No, from her education because she had stress. And then it flies out of my mouth. How can you be down with stress? You don't do anything. And then you could see her face, right? Like something shattered. And I didn't understand it because, when you're young, you don't have these, the empathy and the knowledge to see that this is actually really stupid. And I think it's like 5 years later where that sentence comes back to me, where I tried some of the stuff for myself. And then I call her and I say, do you remember I said that to you? And she said, no, I don't remember it. I say, okay, but I'm really sorry because that was so stupid. So I think that kind of looking back and then saying, okay, what happens is so super fun. Like when we had the twins, I didn't remember anything from having my first child. So I didn't write anything down. There are many people who write everything down when they have a child. And I didn't write anything down because I thought, this is so epic. I'm just going to remember everything. Then I had the twins. Everything was gone.
Wow.
And then I thought, okay, that's pretty amazing. Because if I don't remember anything from something that was so important to me, then there is no reason to, in your life, remember bad stuff. Then if you can pick and choose what you want to remember, only remember the nice stuff. So my husband and I made an agreement that while the kids were small, we had to press every night when we go to bed, we press Control-Alt-Delete. And then everything that has happened during the day is now forgiven. It is gone. And if there's something that you want to bring up, you have to do it before nighttime, because when the day is over, Control-Alt-Delete, and then we wake up in the morning with smiles on our faces and happy. And we are still together. So it has worked pretty well. And I think it has been a sweeter deal for me than for him.
Which I translate as you've caused more trouble than he has.
Yes. Yeah, and he's a military guy. He used to be in the Queen's Guard as a young person. And that's highly recommended. I'd say, girls, find somebody who's been in the military, because it's on their backbone, right? When somebody's waking up at night and you say, so, come up, diaper change. Yes. And then they do it. Yeah, that's really nice.
I always wanted to date someone from the military because I felt they would keep me fit. That's the discipline in the military is incredible, isn't it? But I think having the discipline to do that Control-Alt-Delete philosophy is I mean, I you always say don't go to sleep angry with each other, for example. But it's really, you all know that rule, but we've all done it. I've definitely done it. It's really hard to just like wipe clean and say, okay, today's a new day, and yesterday when you cheated on me and then you went, it's very hard to forgive all that, right? And that Control-Alt-Delete philosophy must be very hard to execute. Yeah, but they say hell is not being able to forgive. I think that's true. And especially not to forgive yourself, that you're going in this loop over and over again, in your mind, where you're thinking about people who did you wrong. So, and it's hard, but again, that's a good thing that life is long. So that we can heal all our trauma. And that's also a future thing, actually, that I think that one of the reasons why so many people are depressed and have anxiety and feeling lonely, and it's kind of like everything is burping up in the moment. I think that many, many people right now are taking responsibility for what has happened through the generations. Very often you see that people who go to see a psychiatrist, they go to see a psychiatrist because they've been living with people who do not want to go to the psychiatrist. Do you know what I mean? No, they might be living with a narcissist or somebody who has a disease in the brains, but they don't want to fix it, which is why they're not taking it out on other people who now go see a psychiatrist. So I think it would actually be nice if you could get hired from your society, because you're healing the wounds of the past and not putting it on to the next generations. Because we have so much on our economy with people who have mental diseases or trauma or stressed or not fitting in anymore. I think that's kind of like a thing in the time right now, that everything is burping up. Totally, yeah. And I think the transference of our anxieties onto our children, for example, is totally underestimated. And I see it with my son. If he is a direct reflection of my energy.
Yes.
And so kids really pick up on that. The one thing I really want to just bring back up, you just mentioned a second ago, that I think listeners out there that are thinking of being entrepreneurs, this kind of lion, dragon, zebra thing, I think it's really interesting. I love the idea that entrepreneurs can be zebras. It sounds like not a very interesting animal, doesn't it? Maybe it's not good for TV, but I really like it as an analogy. You can be a horse, you can blend in. You can have a good time. You can take your time. You can enjoy life. You can have someone on your back and bring them with you, and they can walk alongside you. I like this whole concept of a zebra as opposed to an animal that's going to eat you. Yeah. And I actually think that should be a T-shirt, a philosophy for people to model themselves on as an entrepreneur. And I really do want to smash the stereotype of what people perceive as an entrepreneur. And I do think these shows that we've just discussed, sometimes it's not all about what you get out of it, right? And that whole, I'm going to get something to eat and kill for myself and everyone else, good luck. And I think I want to say that's the 1980s, really, but that seems to be still a lot of people's belief in tread on anyone to get ahead. So I really like that zebra analogy. But when did you realize you were a zebra? I bet you've been asked that question before.
I've always been a zebra, and I think that from all these years that I have at the Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies, because very early on in my life I was exposed to many, many, many different kinds of people. And again, as I started, I was saying that when you work with the future, the underlying thing that you're looking for is the good life. So how do we make life better for people? And then when you meet somebody that were, famous from TV, or somebody who wrote a book, or you share a cab to the airport with a minister, not a minister, what do you call it? Politician, a prime minister, So you're sitting there, you're like 27 years old and you're sharing a cab with the prime minister, and you get to actually, like, I'm curious, right? So you get to ask them questions, and then you figure out they're not happy. They are sad, and they have all this, crap inside of them that they haven't released, and you can start feeling that this is actually not a very nice person. So, and then sometimes you find them. So one of the things that for me stands out is if I can meet a person where you can see they still have the eyes of a child. So they might be 50 or 60 years old, but you can see they are pranksters, and they might be CEOs of huge companies, but they still have the light in the eyes. That for me is a success criteria, that you can still play and you still think that the world is a funny place. If that light goes out, that's not very nice. So that I think that for me has just been, always looking for why are people doing what they do. And I have yet to meet a lion that is happy. That is really, truly happy. There's this also famous guy who drove Lego, the toy company, to a huge success. When he retired, none of his children wanted to take over the business. And I have this idea in my mind. It's like that he went home, that he's been postponing going home to play with his kids, and he invents all this Lego and he has the boxes. And then one day he comes home and he says, "Hey kids, let's play with the Lego." And now they are all like 40 years old. It's like, too late, daddy. And now they actually did. I think some of them actually took over in Lego. But for me, that again was kind of like this epiphany, that's really strange. And another story that comes to mind that also has been this defining moment for me is a Scandinavian Star was a ship that went down in the 80s, was a big catastrophe. There were many Danish people on board that went down with this ship. So this was kind of like really big thing in Scandinavia. And one of the survivors, his name was Morten, was interviewed on TV afterwards. And I was not very old, maybe I was 15 years old. And I see this guy on TV who gets interviewed as a survivor. And he tells a story where he says, "I thought I would have been a hero. I always thought that of myself, that if I ventured into a catastrophe, I would be the one who saved others. I was a primal animal. I stepped over the backs of old ladies. I pried the fingers of people who were lying in the water because they were dragging down the floats, and I pried their fingers off." And he was just being super honest, right? And he's telling this story, and you can see in his face that he's so disappointed in himself. And for me, that was, defining moments, right? It's kind of like where you're just sitting there and the universe is telling you something that you're really not ready to understand. But I just remember that, and this is not to put him in any kind of bad situation. I really have the deepest respect for this guy. And I think that most people probably would have done the same thing. So it's not to make him look bad. But my takeaway from it was that if you want to be the greater hero, you have to be the smaller hero. You can't, it's like a muscle, right? You have to be a small hero every time you have the opportunity. Because when the shit hits the fan and the world calls for a great hero, you are not going to be a hero like that. If you've been sitting behind a desk working on something that wasn't, any kind of value in it, you don't have the skill set to be that greater hero. So that's just been really important for me. Every time I can feel there's a right and wrong thing to do, and it could be tiny, tiny, tiny. Like I had a keynote speech in London for 3,000 people for a consultancy company where people flew in from all over the world. And I was like the keynote speaker, right? I was like, she's so famous. She can do everything. Yeah, I'm from Denmark, but don't tell anybody. And then I go off stage and people are applauding me, and there's a reception afterwards. And then the waiter drops a teaspoon from the tray, and she's walking with 2 trays. And it's kind of like the whole room goes quiet while I go and pick up the teaspoon and puts it on her tray. And I can just feel that all of these people were like, you are out of your place now because you are the keynote speaker. You're not supposed to help the help. And I just remember, it's like my body said, maybe you should stop. Maybe you shouldn't pick it up. And then my soul said, yeah, you have to do it. Remember, Morten, you have to do it. So I think that, those defining moments where life is like, it's like walking in a jungle when you're an entrepreneur. There's so many things where you don't know. And even, there's stuff that you don't know, but then there's also the stuff that you don't know that you don't know. So you're just smashing in, but then you have to look back again and you have to reflect about What did you do? Can you do better? Can you share the goods? What makes you a better person? Because when you're zebra, I guess you're in it for a long run. I think it's much more a lifestyle, where if you're a lion or you're a dragon, I really often hear it's more like you want to grow a business so you can sell it. But then we're back with the villains, right? Have you thought it through?
Yeah.
Okay, so now you sold it. So what now? So what do you want to do now?
Yeah. I mean, what you're talking about, my kind of simple translation of what you're explaining, which is amazing, is to be a small hero. Training wheels for me is things like being humble.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter who you are or what you've got, you're no different to anybody else. And I think being humble is a secret power and a good way of learning to be a hero. And so, I even myself, as I've got more successful, there's this persona that you have, you want to project to the world of the success you are.
Yes.
So somehow, helping someone, for example, pick up the plates off the table and give it to them. Why would you do that? You're hiring a waitress or a waiter. That's their job, But there's something very satisfying in picking up those plates and helping that person take the plates away. Like there's some energy transfer where you're not taking all this power and becoming a dragon. You're not taking all this power and somehow building out a persona that isn't a good one. It's not a happy one. Yeah. So but a lot of people, I think, forget to be humble. And ironically, I think in the early days when people haven't made it, they think proving that they're successful by showing off their fancy car or showing off how much they've got, and that being the exact opposite to humble when they haven't even got the thing that they're saying they've got. It's a really interesting dynamic that you're bringing up here, and I wonder if people can be more humble. I think it's such a wonderful thing when people are humble. I love it when I meet successful people that are humble. It's actually a lovely feeling, because then you're sharing knowledge and you're learning from each other. And honesty, to your point as well, I really like the story about the example you gave of the pilot. And I think that's true for a lot of people. When you're actually tested, you're never going to know. So I love the idea too that you're saying that people need to be practicing being a hero for the moment.
Yeah, also because what in my experience is that kind of like the universe is calling you, right? It's like you have a phone and with a lamplight to the universe, and then the universe is calling you, you have to pick up the phone. and some people don't pick up the phone, right, when the universe is calling, so they get more and more annoyed and, could it please go away, and we don't want to talk about these issues. Yeah. But if you pick up the phone and then the universe has a message for you, you don't understand it, right? When the universe is telling you something. It's more like it's saying gibberish, but later you will understand it. So I have actually heard myself saying, I am so great at being humble. I might be one of the most humble people in the world.
Oh, that's very humble of you. Yeah, exactly.
I had this wonderful experience also where I'm driving in a cab. So I live in Dragør. That's very close to the airport outside of Copenhagen. So I drive to the airport often, right? Because I'm such an international person. Not at the moment, but I used to drive back and forth from the airport. And then I'm sitting with this taxi driver, and I do what I always do because I'm such a lovely person, right? I'm open and I like to converse with people, and I'm so charming. So I'm talking to the taxi driver, and he tells me that he's been driving this taxi for 15 years. He's been driving in Copenhagen back and forth for 15 years. And then I say, that is so funny because I've been living this is younger me. I've been living here for 10 years and I drive back and forth to the airport so often. And it's so funny that I have never met you. And then he looks at me and says, yeah, that's super funny because I meet you all the time.
That is funny.
Yeah. So, hello, you being open and, talking with people. And like I've been driving with this guy and I haven't noticed him for so many times. And I think that's you have to forgive yourself for being an idiot. I think that when we start talking about, I want to be humble, right? Or I want to be a hero, or I want to be happy, it's because you're not. But that's where the universe calls you and say, you're actually ready now to play that game. You're ready to play the game of being humble. But the reason why I'm giving you that game is because you're not humble. Because when you really, truly know what humble means, it stops being something that you have to train. It's just something that you are. I don't know if you tried it, Simon, but if there's something that's very important for you, it feels like everybody wants to challenge you on it. Like for the first 6 years when I was a futurist, I couldn't go anywhere on TV or a business meeting or a party or reception without having some old geezer coming up to me and say, I think future studies are stupid. I don't think you can predict the future. It happened all the time. It's like I attracted them. And then I start talking about, you can predict the future and trends are wonderful. And they were just like, couldn't care less. And it was so annoying. But when I made peace with it, when I said to myself, I really actually don't care. And I truly didn't care. When people come up to me and say, I don't believe you can predict the future. It's like, okay, well, then you can't. I believe it. And if you want to talk about that, I'll be more than happy to comply. But it's not my position to force it down your throat or pick a fight with you because it's not interesting to me. So when I made that peace with myself, what happened? Nobody has ever challenged me on it again. So I think that, when you're talking about energy, I think that's what it is. It's like magnets, right? That if you have a negative energy or you have a positive energy, you are attracting the negativity or the positivity. But when it's just neutral, when it's just a part of you, and you can pick it up and you can use it, but now it's just something that you are. I think that maybe that's true success.
It's very interesting. You make me think about when people say climate change isn't real, I do find myself wanting to, of course it's real, what are you talking about? But part of me also wants to go, all right, well, let's see who's right. Let's just sit back and wait.
Let's see who's right. Let's talk in 10 years' time.
I mean, Trump
but
people.
That's because what you believe is a choice.
What you believe is a choice.
You always have to remember that, What you believe is a choice.
I'm always holding out for undecided voters, I guess,
Yeah.
Is this person
even science? No, even science is a choice. If you ask people, do you believe in science? So it's a choice that you believe in science. But when you believe in science, then a lot of stuff makes sense and you can build from there. So the problem with people who don't believe in science, like flat earthers, for instance, they would actually say, stop throwing math at me. I don't believe in science. That's what they're saying. I believe my own eyes. So when I look out the window, I can see the earth is flat. That's proof enough for me. And then everybody else is like, oh my God. But that's different belief systems.
Do you think this phone call, the universe calling you thing, do you think when the phone call comes through, it's fear that you first feel? I mean, I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to translate when people. So it's not a real phone call, of course. So people aren't actually getting a phone call. So what is it that people when it's your calling or when you're getting that call? What form does it take? I guess.
I think you say call, so like a calling.
Yeah, when you said earlier, you said the universe is calling you, and you've got to, rise to that opportunity. But I feel like people don't rise to that opportunity when the call comes in because they feel fear.
So, for example,
fear. They might have an idea, for example, and they're like, "This idea can make the world better," and they're like, "But I don't have enough money. I could go broke doing that, or I could lose my house doing that, or I could this, that, and all these things stop them. This fear, and they pull back and they kind of put the phone down.
Yes, yeah, I think that's true. And I think that, again, that's one of the difference between visionary entrepreneurs and just an entrepreneur or people who say, no, comfort is what I want. I think that all the people who are visionary entrepreneurs and who succeed in business, the ones that we build cases around, Elon Musk and Steve Jobs and so on, I think that is what they do. They have a calling. They have this sensation, they have this urge, this feeling, and then they just do it and not think so much about it. I can actually truly say that also about myself, that people very often say, you are so courageous. And then I say, no, I just don't have a sense of reality. I don't think about what can go wrong. It's like there's nothing. And for me, then when I learned that other people have this, fear and the demons and, the trolls and it's like they have all these devils talking to them about this could go wrong and this could go wrong. And then you turn on the media and then you hear all the bad stories. And then they say, okay, maybe it's better not to start at all. I think that fear is also a big issue in future studies. We actually say that when you want to create the future, it's like you have a bridge that you're passing. And then you have the old world, which we call tribal. And tribal is them versus us. It's scarce resources. It's building a house, having a job, all those things that we know. But the future is very much planetary, which means that it's hyper-connected, not just technologically, but also between people. It's based much more on creativity and being imagining that stuff can happen. And you're not allowed to make fear-based decisions in the future. So when you pass that little bridge, there's a troll standing on the bridge, which we call the taboo troll. It's the evil cousin of trends. So you see the trends, right? You see the future. You see, oh, this could be wonderful. And then you start walking, and then you meet the troll. And the troll wants your fear. The troll eats fear. So you have to give your fears to the troll. And the nice thing is that you don't have to do anything else. You just have to face your fear and hand it over and then go into the future.
Wow, I love it. And I'm looking at your CV. Two things I've just spotted. One is it starts at 2000. So I feel like that's when you had your first child, roughly.
Yes. Yeah.
So you actually had your first child when you decided you were going to get the job that you wanted that they didn't give you, but you took it anyway.
Oh my God! Now we have to think back. No, so I that must have been in 19. I had my first. What is he now? He's 16. So he was born in 2004, and I had my first job around 2000 at the Copenhagen Institute.
Right.
Yeah. So I was there for 3 years, and then I started my first business, Future Navigator, and then I ran that for 15, 16 years. And then last year I started a new one called Universal Futurist, because the longing of being white piece of paper entrepreneurship where you don't know anything. And then, of course, it's called Universal Futurist, because now it's like we want the universe, we want the whole planet.
So tell me, well, first of all, before I jump into the final bit about where you are today, you've alumni at Wharton Business School, alumni at Columbia Business School. What's your view on education? I know you work with a lot of educational institutions, so we've always got to be sensitive and respectful for them. But you know what? I worry about education today. I worry it's a little bit looking back instead of looking forward. What's your view?
I think I've had many thoughts about it. I don't think that there's one answer to it, because education is very often treated as kind of like a fix, for everything. I don't know if you also do it where in your area of the world, but it's very common in Denmark to say this should be on the scheduler for the schools. Kids should learn that in school. And it's like, okay, there is no limits to what a child should learn at school now. I think that there is that education, just like science, might be some of the greatest innovations that we have ever made. Because when you educate somebody, you take the knowledge of the past, right? And then you give it to somebody else. But I think that we have to think very thoroughly about what it is that we are commuting over. Like being able to light a fire without a lighter. I think that's actually a very basic human skill. And it took humans thousands of years learning how to do this, right? Maybe first it was lightning and then they could pass it over. Pretty fearful, right? I guess the first one would be super scared about it.
Sure, it was pretty scary.
But then somebody had, and a squirrel found fall into the fire and roasted, and it was actually pretty tasty. And then they came up with the idea that maybe we should make a fire, roast more squirrels. And then all of a sudden the fire goes out. I don't know, how did they come up with that? Right? Sitting there, that's pretty good. That's a pretty good idea. And then you can do it with kind of like those fire stones, and you can use all kinds of different material. And I think those things were before people could do that, it would have taken them like 1,000 years. And now you have the technique. Everybody should have that, right? I think that when you teach math, you should teach people the magic of math. You should teach them algebra. You should teach them, where does it come from? Why is there an 8 system and a 10 system? How with all these, thingies with the little pearls that people are using, so that you actually get this passion for what math is before it gets super boring. I think that many, many people today are just bored with education because it is boring. Why should kids learn to write? Even read a book. When my 4 boys read a book, that's a success by themselves, right? Then they are supposed to write down what they read afterwards. Way to kill an interest, way to kill a passion. Do you ever do that, Simon? Do you pick up a book and read it, and after that you write down,
Totally. Well, there's two elements that are annoying. One, you're being told to do it, which most humans don't like being told to do anything. And second is, exactly, you just want to contemplate your own views on it inside your own head. You can write it down if you want to. But
if you want to,
the idea you're absolutely right. I mean, I do love the knowledge transfer piece. I guess in business in particular, I think business knowledge in, let's say, business schools, and I've spoken at a few myself. So what often happens, and my kind of concern is that they talk about case studies of something that failed in 2000. Let's say a .com company, and use this as a case study as to what went wrong, but has no relevance to today. And all it actually does is just put fear in people. This guy came out, he raised £50 million, this .com business, and it completely failed, and now he's broke. And this is what he did wrong. He started when there was no internet users. Okay.
Yeah.
What use is that? It just creates the fear point, back to your point earlier. I think that just creates, the phone call's going to come, and you're going to feel fear because of that training. Right?
Yeah. And again, if everything you heard was people making mistakes, going through their fears and making a success, or not making a success, but then people coming in, other zebras, and helping them, and then making a success, and then failing and being a success again. If that was what you heard, I think maybe more people would venture in and try being entrepreneurs. I think that education in the future is going to be super funny. I think that you could throw it all on its heads, because now we have every knowledge, like you're sitting in this library, and we have access to the whole world, and we can drag stuff in. I just bought virtual reality headsets for my children.
Mind blowing.
Guess what I've been doing for the last 48 hours.
Talk about the future. That is the future, that stuff. Crazy.
That is the future. So I think that the normal way for people to learn something is that I have a dream, I have an idea, I want to make it real. And that could be baking a cookie, or learning to play a guitar, or building a shelf. And now I try and I mess it up. Okay, now I actually am curious about learning how to make a cookie, or maybe some math because it was really crooked. So now I'm interested because I have this problem that I wanted to fix. So if we change the school system, I think that would be great if children could be examined in those kind of things, not in math, not in religion, not in prose, but in fixing a problem, or working together, or solving a conflict, so that you did something. I think also it's very important that education becomes a tangible thing and not just in your head. Like, I'm a biologist and I'm also a political scientist. And political science is complete and utter bullshit. It is just many words after one another that politicians and journalists can use to sound smart while not doing anything. So people with political science background should not be trusted. Whereas if you have a natural science education, or if you're a pilot, or if you're a doctor or a nurse, there's something very interesting in that the higher the value of your job is, or the more dangerous it is, the more you train on your job. So when I was a biologist, you would have a teacher telling you stuff and you didn't understand it. And then afterwards you went into the lab and you cut in things, and you had to do with what you call it in chemistry, you had to blow stuff up. And that was funny, right? And then it happened and you didn't know why. And then you had to go back and study again. So you went back and forth from doing something and reading about it. If you have a pilot, that's what they do. They have theory, and then they go into a simulator, and then they go into an airplane. And I know from pilots that they say, if we make a mistake, talk to each other. And there's no blame game. There's no fear, because we want to fix the problem so that nobody gets hurt. If you're a doctor, if you're a nurse, if you're an engineer, it's very, very common that when you learn something that has a theory behind it, you also have to practice. I don't think that anybody wants to go to the dentist or having open heart surgery, and then they call you and say, I never tried it. No. I have read a lot about it. I had got really good grades. This is the first time I'm flying a real airplane. I tried the simulator and the theory.
I was actually on a flight where someone said that once, though. That was pretty scary. They're like, "This is my first ever flight, folks." I'm like, "No."
Exactly. Like,
I guess it's happened. Everyone's had their first ever flight, but that ties into my personal belief system, which I like my audience to pick up on here, which is, no one's born an entrepreneur. It's all training, isn't it? No one's born a lawyer. No one's born a doctor. All of these things require, knowledge transfer and information. And I think it's interesting you mentioned, I do see pilots sharing knowledge. I know recently with the airplane that had a lot of problems. A lot of the pilots were talking with each other about the problems with their aeroplane, but the authority that managed the aeroplane companies wasn't willing to take a risk and push back and make the plane stop flying until they got fixed. But the pilots were talking about it for a long time before those accidents happened. But I do feel like this is one of the reasons I do the podcast. I think entrepreneurs have so much insight and so much knowledge that actually being an entrepreneur isn't that complicated. It is a series of insights, 50 things, I think, that ultimately you can be a good, you called them Jedis, you know, of sort of your version of a futurist, but you can be a Jedi, right? It's actually, what type of Jedi, what type of superpower have you got to go alongside your Jedi training, right? Yeah. Even Jedis had to have training.
Exactly. Yeah? Everybody has to have training. I also love Einstein once said that it's not that I'm so smart, I just stick with the problem longer.
Well,
and when I have a problem, very often I think, okay, I have to, and it's like the universe is calling me and saying, this problem, that one, not that one, this one, but I don't know how to do it. Yeah, but that's why it's a problem, right?
You're
so you have to stick with the problem.
You're answering all my questions really without me asking them, which is, I guess the style of a futurist. You know, what is luck, right? What do you think about luck? I think you're kind of answering it there, right? It's a persistence thing over time, and those sorts of things.
Yeah, actually, I think that luck is like a river. I always seen luck like a river, that you have to put your foot in it. You have to be in luck. And if you don't want to be in the river, you have to be in a place where the river can find you. Because luck is, for me, is moving around. It's opportunities that sometimes you can see and other times you can't see them. So you probably also know people who would say, I'm not lucky. But you walk a mile in their shoes, you would see all the opportunities that, because their mindset is that they don't see the river. So I have also met people who say that you're so lucky, you know, and you all do all this stuff. So, but I'm also moving a lot. You know, I'm talking with people. I'm pushing myself out there. I'm trying. If a journalist calls me and says, do you want to go on television? 9 out of 10 times I say yes. I don't say, what are we going to talk about? It's more like, yeah, I will come, because I know from journalists that they are interviewing the people who will come. There are so many smart and clever people. And this is also a man-woman thing. Most men also come when a journalist will call them. Women are more like, nah, I don't know, and the kids and that. I'm just coming. I'm saying, okay, can you come with a van and park on the street, and I'll go out there, and then we'll figure it out afterwards, because that is luck. You know, that's maybe somebody will see it, and 3 years later, that's a new client because they thought that, you know, there was something there. That's how the world moves. So when I have people who are just sitting behind a desk, I'll tell them, you know, that's not where the river is. You know, that the river is super dry where you are sitting. And that's a choice that you are making. But if you want to be a lucky person, you have to kind of like, you know, push yourself out. Maybe someday somebody will come by with a boat that you can sail on the river of luck, and it will take you somewhere new.
Lovely way of explaining it. Couldn't agree more. I'm just, again, fascinated by your CV. News anchor. What happened there?
Yes, I've been forced with money and fame. No, I have had so many, and back to the humble thing, right? I had so many job offerings in the media business with high-end or anchor or news speaker, journalist thingy. And the funny thing is that when I was a child, when people forced me to say, what do you really want to do when you grow up? I would say journalist, just to have an answer. And then I realized that, no, I actually don't want to be a journalist. But journalists and futurists have very much in common. You know, then they are curious people. It's kind of like an identity. You know, if you're a journalist, you're always working. The same with a futurist. And journalists very often also write about trends. They just put them in a newspaper or on TV. And so many people who offered me jobs. But when I come in to a media house, I can just feel that I should walk away. I can feel it's not the place for me. I will be an awful, awful, awful person. I would be really, really, really good at it, but it would eat me up from the inside. I just know it. It's the same with the CEO. If I got offered a position in, you know, kind of like a huge global IT company, I could do that really well, but I would be an awful, awful person. I just know it. So I can feel it, like the universe is calling me and say, don't do it. But then this one time they called me and say, hey, now we have the perfect slot for you. It's going to be future, it's going to be technology, and it's going to be innovation. So it's all about hope. So I said, okay, then. And it's the worst decision I ever made in my life. It was horrible because I compare it with social media. If I do anything on social media, I have instant feedback, right? And I have a reach that was much higher than any program I made on television. And they kind of owned me. That was the worst thing. All of a sudden, I was an employee. I had to be there at a certain time. I couldn't go home when I wanted to. This also sounds like really prima donna, but I had to sit in makeup for an hour every day, then doing my hair, doing my makeup to do like a 3-minute spot. I was dying on the inside. I hated it so much. And then after a couple of months, they came and told me that they wanted to focus more on money and politics. It's like, yeah, that's everything else that you're doing.
They were literally trying to kill you, weren't they? They were trying to kill your spirit.
They were trying to kill my spirit, and I faked that I was sad. But the funny thing then again was I had 3 shows that I could make where I was in charge because nobody cared. So I could do whatever I wanted. So I did a whole segment on Star Wars.
Oh, wow. Brilliant.
Yeah, because that was the year where the first new Star Wars came out, the real Star Wars movie, number 7, I guess it is. So I was sitting on my birthday alone in the movie theater at the Star Wars premiere and watching Star Wars. I've never been more happy in my life. Brilliant. And then I was allowed to do an interview with 3 experts in the studio where we talked about Star Wars. So like, when are we going to have a lightsaber? And what would it cost to build a Death Star? And how gravity, why are they walking around in the Millennium Falcon? Where if we see the space station, they're floating around. So what's happening, guys? It was so much fun. It's the best thing.
I'm sure that's where they wanted for their serious news channel.
Yeah.
But that's fascinating. What I like about that story so much is, as well, a lot of people would dream of being a news anchor. It was, if you ask a lot of young people I speak to about their future career options, and definitely being on TV or being famous, it comes up. But what I like about what you're talking about, there's being famous doing something you love, and there's being famous doing something you hate. And, the famous bit isn't actually the important bit.
And it can be for some people, but that's, again, you have to try it before you know it, right? You venture in and you try stuff and then you turn around. And I think that's the beauty of how the world is right now, is that there's this abundance of things that you can try out. And for me, that wasn't fun. But then you're sitting I was sitting in an airplane. I think I was going to Sweden, and there was an interview from 3 fat Swedish production guys. And they talked about that they are these production guys who write all the pop star songs. So like 75% at that time of all the hits in pop music in the world has been written from these 3 fat Swedish men. And they say, we never talk about it. This is a very, an interview that is rarely given because nobody wants to hear Britney Spears singing Hit Me Baby One More Time and think of a fat Swedish producer. And I just thought,
I'm never listening to these songs again in the same way. My listeners are now going to play these things. But
my thought was, I want to be a fat Swedish producer. That's what I want to be. But you don't know that that's what you want to be before you tried the other thing, right? So now you can make a decision. Again, what do you want to do and what don't you want to do?
I want you to be the CEO of Fixing Education, please.
Yes, please. I will do that.
And and then I like the idea of you running the universe. I think not just the planet. I feel like there's Elon Musk is trying to get to Mars. I think that needs properly managed. I'm not sure why we need to go to Mars. We could just go to the moon, couldn't we, if we want to be a multi-planet
species? I think
that
what we say as futurists is that for the last hundreds of years, when humans journeyed or ventured, we ventured out. So we went over the hill or over the ocean or to a different country. But what we're doing now is that we venture in. So we travel not only out, we also travel in because we want to learn about ourselves. And I think that when we go to the moon, we learned a lot about who are we actually on this planet. So when we're going to Mars, it's going to tell us a lot about who are we actually. If we meet some aliens out there, would they be disgusted with us? If people are living in that tin can going to Mars, who are they together? And if we took an average of the 10 friends we have, Simon, I'm pretty sure people would eat each other before we kind of like 30 kilometers across the moon. Now everybody's just fighting and eating each other. So we have to become better people. It's a very, it's a great dilemma to talk with people, like who would you travel with to Mars, and how are we supposed to behave towards each other?
To your point earlier about hanging out with your kids all the time, I think I love my son. I absolutely love spending time with him, but I don't know if I could even travel with him to Mars. I'd be like, can't you just keep quiet for an hour, please? Would be interesting. I mean, I've got a couple of questions before we end, because I'm conscious of time, and thank you so much for giving so much of it to me and the audience. But I was interested in when you moved from Future Navigator, your business there that you ran for 16 years, and then now your present business, Universal Futurist. What was the main difference between the two platforms?
It is more specific. It's where Future Navigator was a lot about the future. So there's like a new scenario. There's always a new trend, discussing, debating, but I kind of lacked that social proof, where you can say that if you're a bricklayer, here is the house that I built. Or if you're a personal trainer, you can see, here is Simon, the fat ass. Here is Simon. Look how beautiful he is now. That you could basically say, before it was like this, and now it is like this. And I truly believe myself that we are right now living in epic times. I think that so much right now is at stake. We call it this, from more to better, or from tribal to planetary, that we can eat each other up in the search for more, like the lions and the dragons. But as a biologist, actually, I see that nature is much more about interdependency. It's much more about being hyperconnected. And I think that the human race is actually moving into becoming much more ease with itself, much kinder, passionate. But somebody has to go there first to show people that this is what it's at. Like you're saying, that if you don't believe in climate change, you won't see it. And if you don't believe in humanity, you won't see kindness. And I think that the people who have it in them, maybe entrepreneurs, could be everybody, but I think that we have to be the good role models. And then again, I have a good friend. His name is Martin Thorborg. He's one of the most famous entrepreneurs in Denmark. Would probably be a cool dude to have on your podcast. And he had a huge success with his business, like a lion. And he sold it off, and then he started a new one. But when he started the new one, he went in as an entrepreneur because it's so much fun. So he was bootstrapping his business and hiring people. When he had a surplus of money in that business, he has, millions and millions that he could put into the business. But he says that there's no greater fun than being an entrepreneur. So, and I thought that's pretty right? That when you're struggling as an entrepreneur, most of the time, that you're struggling with the right things. You're struggling with your passion. And for me, being in Future Navigator was funny. It was nice. I loved it. We worked really well together. But I just really loved that, starting from a clean slate. I really, really loved starting a new business, not having a bank account, looking at my, male subscribers and having zero and having no clients and no brand and nothing, and then just starting over.
I couldn't agree more. I think so many people out there that are looking to start their business, a lot of my listeners, the journey is just so exciting. You're actually, yes. When you get there, it's not, selling your company, I've done it a few times. It's actually, it's not as rewarding as you expected it to be. It's a good target, I guess. Maybe, yeah. I don't think you should build a business to sell it, but I like the idea that you've got some motivation that you could, if you wanted to, you're not trapped by the business, for example. But I do think that building piece is so powerful, what you're talking about there. And I would add something else to, insight you've just brought to the table there, that having no money when you start a business, like that person you just described, bringing no money to the table actually adds value in another way, which is like I'm building my platform now. I've got a huge amount of resource to put into this, but I'm very careful about deploying it because I want to be in touch with the people listening. I want to be in touch with the community. If I suddenly hire, for example, social media experts and all these, I'm going to have a barrier between me and the community. And yes. so sometimes money does not solve all problems. Sometimes money can cause problems because you don't get to pioneer because you're not listening carefully enough to people you're serving. So I've seen a lot of people raise a lot of money, for example, start a business, and it fails. And the person that raised no money succeeds because yes. that person who raised no money is on the ground, in the trenches, listening carefully, fixing the product because they haven't got a lot of money to waste on it, and they get it right by listening. Whereas people with money tend to like, this is what we're doing, boom. And then they just expect the money to bring the business alive, right?
I have such a great example of that entrepreneurial mindset. There's these 3 young dudes in Denmark who have started a company, which is today quite successful, called Shaping New Tomorrow. And what they sell is suits for men that feels like a sweatsuit. So it's like a nice suit, but it feels like sweats. I think that's just magnificent. Who wouldn't love to have that? And they had, struggling business, the story. And then they actually went into the Dragon's Den. They got funding, and everybody then chipped in. No, everybody came and bought everything they had because they were on television. So they kind of like gave them this huge boost. But what also happened was that their website wasn't geared with logistics. So now they actually sold 1,000 or was it 3,000 pieces of clothes that they didn't have in stock. So now they're sitting there thinking, okay, it felt like a success, but it really isn't. What they then did, and I think that's the entrepreneurial mind, right, is that you roll with it. So instead of saying, okay, that we're really scared about it, or it just feels like a big fuck up, but we can roll with it. So they brought in all their friends, their family, and they called everybody who has bought something in the store and they couldn't send it because it didn't exist. They called each and everybody and they said, we're so sorry, but we had this and we are just starting out. But we promise you, like in three months, maybe 5, we will send you the equipment. Is that okay for you? And everybody, of course, said, yeah, we love you guys. And they learned so much from talking with the clients, which today means that they are selling directly. So they're not selling via stores. And they have their own internal social media department, because they learned so much about their clients that they know we can't have a communication bureau on the outside. We actually have to have social media marketing on the inside of the company. So I'm totally with you, Simon. I think that listening is so important.
That whole, I think in translation of your insight, I fake it till you make it is kind of the phrase that comes to mind. And I think where people go wrong with fake it till you make it is they don't follow through. So I think fake it till you make it is absolutely fine if you do what you just described there with those guys, that they faked it in a way, they didn't have the product, but they followed through by being sincere, getting back to the clients, being transparent, and eventually getting the product to the clients. And so that's, everyone's going to see that as, the entrepreneurial hustle. I think where the word hustle and fake it till you make it goes wrong is when people then take that money and they don't deliver the product, or they had no intention of delivering the product. That's where it's not good to fake it till you make it, right? And
again, if you misbehave or you do something that might be a bad habit, or it might be something that comes from a trauma, and then all of a sudden you realize that, again, the universe is calling you and say, hey, that's not okay. What you're doing there is basically not okay. And then you have to change it, because fake it till you make it is also a little bit like you're saying cheating, right? But what you realize the older you get, that you are only faking and cheating yourself. I realized, I think I must have been like 30, 35, 37, that I lied a lot, but I didn't know that I did it. But I became, I found myself in this situation where people asked me a question and then I couldn't remember what I answered 3 weeks ago because I lied about it. Or I was sitting in a car to a meeting and then they call me and say, we're waiting for you. Are you coming? And then I would say, yeah, I'm there in 15 minutes. And when 15 minutes comes out of my mouth, I know it's a lie because I know at least it's going to take me 30 minutes. But it was like such a bad habit. And then all of a sudden you wake up and you can say, okay, this is just putting me, in a different way in the jungle where I'm not supposed to be. Then you come back and do the apologies. But that was basically to myself, because I could see that lying thing was much more like a self-protection. And it had to do with self-worth. And it had to do with me trying to be something that I wasn't and protecting myself with telling all these stories. But I realized that because I talk so much that I have to tell the truth, because otherwise I can't remember what I'm saying. But being honest for me is also standing up to myself. And it is also, and that probably comes back to my school days, being that girl that never had any friends. It is also trusting that my real friends will find me if I am honest. I think that's maybe the hugest paradox for people is that everybody wants to be loved just as they are, right? Want to be loved just as we are. But we are so scared that people won't like us if they see us for what we are. So we put all these kinds of bells and whistles around us. But the older you get, you find out, okay, you have to take that one, you have to take that one, you have to take that one. And then you lose people along the way, right? You lose people that you thought were good for you or don't match together with anymore, or, you know, that you have to learn stuff the hard way. But just coming back to your point with, I think that many wonderful things in being an entrepreneur, but I think that there's also many nasty things. I think there's also many ugly things. I think that you trample on people's toes and you do it, and then maybe it takes you a long time before you turn around and you look at it and you can see, okay, I left behind a big smoking crater, and that's actually not okay. And then you have to deal with it. So for me, being an entrepreneur maybe is also, you know, a personal development program. Maybe that's
I agree with that.
The
totally.
Conclusion.
I'm always personally trying to improve my software
Yes.
and hardware.
Yeah.
You know, I'm always trying. I mean, I think I've been trying to do a video blog on lying for about 3 months, because I think it's a really interesting subject, actually. Because we all seen that movie with Ricky Gervais where no one lies.
The Invention of
right?
Lying. I love it. Yeah.
And that kind of personifies the problem. I mean, it's a necessary part of society. You know, I say to my son started lying to me. You know, and part of me, you know, wants to say, don't lie. But actually some elements, you know, you have to. I remember my wife was 8 months pregnant. She's like, do I still look the same? I'm like, you look beautiful. And,
you're so beautiful, honey.
You know, but it's, of course, you're 8 months pregnant. It is beautiful in a certain way. But, you know what I mean? Like, you can't, there's not, the question she's asking, she doesn't want the brutal truth, you know, like, you do look a bit tired and you've eaten a lot of extra food in the last 8 months, so you know you've looked better, you know, like, you just, that's not right to answer that way. But, you know, that's a very lame example, but you know what I mean, right? Lying is a really interesting subject. And I find that kind of the whole lying process a pretty confusing one, because as a kid you're told not to lie, but I think if you told everyone the truth, you'd be in a lot of trouble by the time you're 10.
Yeah. And would be really interesting to also look into artificial intelligence, right? Because is lying, is that the final human frontier? Because I think it takes very much empathy and intelligence to lie in a humble way.
Because actually lying is exactly what you just described it as. You're trying to give value to the person who you're lying to, actually, in a way. And I think, like, for example, your time example you gave there, I have lied about timing. I know it's 25 minutes. I'm saying 15, but I'm hoping somewhere in between it's 20. So it's not a big lie. It's not a small, you know. So there's some structure in my head. And then if I say 15 and I'm 20, it's okay. If I say 25 and I'm already late, it's clearly quite rude. So there's an interesting, you know, there is an intellect to lying, actually.
And meanwhile, in Spain, they are like, yeah, you're coming.
Yeah, you're coming. We'll see you when you see you. That's fine. You know, like, where are we sleeping? I think we just generalized the whole of Spain. But yes, I totally agree. Look, I could talk to you all day, actually. This is probably, again, one of my longest podcasts. And so I'm going to have to draw a line and have you back. I'm just in love with the way you think and the insights that you have. And I'm so grateful that you spend so much time sharing it with me and the audience today. I'm going to quickly sum up some of the things I've taken today, and then I'm going to say goodbye to you.
It has been such a delight, and I will be so happy to come back.
Yeah, well, it's really, really amazing. These are the things I love. Be a small hero. We should make that a t-shirt like that. Maths is magic. I love describing maths. I would have loved maths if it was described to me as magic. Let's absolutely do that. No means not at the moment. In business, that's so true, I think. Nobody decides who you are. So true. But so many people let other people decide what are you going to do when you grow up? I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm going to be a TV anchor. I love the idea of what problem you're going to solve when you grow up. You know, like nobody decides who you are. I think keeping the eyes of a child is so true. I look at my son's eyes and just thinking about it right now makes me want to cry. It's just so magical. And I absolutely know what you mean. When I meet people and they have that in their eyes still, I love hanging out with them. It's just, having fun. I think the grown-up challenge, I love this concept of Control-Alt-Delete as an adult. I think if you can master that, your life will be so much better. I think we often choose to be miserable.
Yeah.
And we don't need to. I love it. And I'm going to try it. I think it's going to take me a few years to get it right. And but I'm going to literally talk to my wife tonight about it. I love it. Don't think so much. It's kind of an interesting thing. I think a lot of people do overthink things. And I think this whole concept of being a zebra, not a dragon, not a lion, being a zebra, that's a good thing, And I think
also a T-shirt.
Yeah, another T-shirt. Are you a Jedi? I think it's this whole training thing. I love this whole "Are you a Jedi?" point you made. From my side, I could go on and on. I've loved having you on the show. Thank you for coming on. And my final question is: if you went back to your younger self and gave one bit of advice, what would it be?
Oh, what would it be? Maybe relax a bit. You're gonna get there. I think when my younger self was so busy, again, always moving, was, it's all there.
Relax a bit. Yeah.
Relax.
Another T-shirt.
It's okay to relax.
Keep calm and carry on. We might get in some trademark problems with the people that own that one. Keep calm and carry on, but I like it.
But otherwise, my favorite motto is: you can always panic later.
Yeah, always panic later.
Later is always the right time to panic.
Yeah, which is what I loved about the live podcast we did, which again, guys, I'll put the link up here, a whole set of different insights that Anna gave us. So I love it. And thank you so much for your time today. Absolutely wonderful to have you here today. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Good Luck Club podcast. If you found what Anna had to say interesting, then please do me a favor. Go to her social media down below, give her a like, say hello, and tell her what you think the future looks like. We know you have thousands of podcasts that you could be listening to, and you take the time out to listen to ours. We feel incredibly lucky.